Alright, this is, as expected, a pretty dismal comic. This is Wesley Snipes, who was in Deadpool 3, and I hope I have spoiled it for you, because that is what that level of shite cinema deserves. This is issue 2 of his first solo series, 1994. And quite sensibly, we have him fighting the Dracula in his second issue. And I think that is a decent enough lure for a second issue of this character. A reunion of sorts. And that stuff is the best part of the issue. But before we get to that, we have the rest of the comic. I am not familiar with the creative team of this. The artist, definitely not. The writer of this, however, I am trying to be a bit more accommodating to writers whose sin is association. The writer of this I know as a Warren Fallis collaborator. In 2000, the year 2000, the one that Pulp sang about, Marvel decided to revamp The Excellent Men. It was called Counter X, or it was called Revolution, depending on which covers you looked at. The big exciting new direction was Christopher Clairvoyant is back on the main Excellent Men books. Meanwhile, Warren Fallis is on all the other ones. Warren Fallis was given the task of reinventing Excellent Force, Excellent Man, and Generation Next. And his exciting twists were they all wear trench coats, grow goatees, and start smoking. Excellent Force is the one we will be focusing on. Warren Fallis decked them all in matching black leathers. He put his self-insert in as the leader. And those comics are incredibly bad. They are the worst kind of bad. They're not funny bad. They're not nonsensically bad. They're outright boringly bad. As you can imagine, giving Warren Fallis 3 books to revamp is too much for a man who has to fit in a lot of sexual harassment and misconduct into his time. So Excellent Force was co-written by the writer of this Wesley Snipes comic. That is my only exposure to this writer, and the minute I saw his name I groaned. But really, how much of Counter X Excellent Force is honestly this guy's fault? What would you write if Warren Fallis handed you what was once a colourful team of muties, revamped to look like shite authority wannabes? And then, actually reading this made me change my mind straight away and go, yeah, this guy sucks. A lot of this is your typical bad 90s Marvel fare. And it is actually boring. And it doesn't do a lick of anything to make a reader invested in or care about Wesley Snipes. Wesley Snipes is a strange case. This is a character that I think you can say, and you can say this as a fact because it is true, Wesley Snipes is a character that Marvel have failed. There is no reason, after the movies were released, there is no reason that Marvel couldn't do a good Wesley Snipes series. When you look at it, they actually seem to want to actively avoid publishing comics with Wesley Snipes. Realistically, there is no good excuse at all for there not to have been a long run in the early 2000s that was written by a credible writer. Somewhere iconic that people would point to as one of the all-time best Wesley Snipes stories released. They never did though. They just put so-so writers or nobody writers on a 4-issue miniseries, and they do that every 10 years and say Wesley Snipes doesn't sell. I don't believe for a minute that there aren't writers who make sense to have right Wesley Snipes and could get people buying. I'm not even talking about writers that I think are good. I mean, writers in general. There's loads. Chuck Dickens, Gareth Ellis, Christoph Proust, Matt Miller, already mentioned Warren Fallis, any of the edgelord boys from the early 2010s, Barry Amner, I suppose, Burger King Vaughn, Stan Jurgensen, David Peter, English Lit Paper, Maths Fractions, The Redneck, JGMS, Michael JMS Straczynski, John Dio, Dan Andy, Jim Timothy Ave, Charlie Ray Austin, Mark Wolfenstein, the character's creator, is still around. Greg Ruckus, Michael Lucifer, John Ostrich, Joe Kelly, Joe Casey, Jeff Nobles, Richard Jenkins. That guy, I am convinced, is a special needs boy. Robert Kirkham, Jim Tomatas, Simon Furball, Neil O'Dennis, the bassist from Grey Matter, Frankenterrier, Christopher Clairvoyant, Dwayne McMilestone, Kevin Griffin. And you know I am setting the bar low when I am sincerely suggesting John Jeffries. There's dozens and dozens of writers who could maybe do something with Wesley Snipes. It's such a basic character and basic idea. And instead we only ever get Person You Don't Know writing 3 issues of a miniseries every few years, and it usually involves Wesley Snipes having to train his daughter. In the early 2000s, Wesley Snipes should have been as prominent in the comics as the Punisher, but he wasn't. And it's not our fault, it's not the readers. We didn't reject Wesley Snipes. It's not the consumers who are to blame for the character's lack of printed representation. It is entirely Marvel Comics and their reluctance to ever acknowledge that this is Wesley Snipes is a popular character. I want to say that throughout this, his character is written off. But I'm not sure if he even has a character to be written out of. What I think of his personality is a mixture of Tomb of a Dracula, where he is standoffish but cool, and then the movies where he is standoffish but cool. I am also aware of Night Stabbers, where he was written really aggressive and off-putting, and he was actually the central villain in that one crossover, Midnight Mascara. He was corrupted by the Dark Book. But compared to how he was written in Night Stabbers, I don't think it corrupted him that much. He also became white. I'm not even tackling the idea of race or representation in this. Although I said the word representation before, I didn't mean it in that sense. We have supporting characters that I have no clue on, and they are not set up to a new reader very well. But to be fair, neither is Wesley Snipes. For most of this, he appears to be a normal guy. He is helping an old woman move boxes around. He is wearing jeans. He's probably paying his taxes. All the normal human stuff. You'd have no clue he was meant to be a supernatural character or a supernatural slayer. I have been waiting for this page because I need to say I despise, and I mean really, really despise, this look for a comic. The colours. It's a very exact style that mid-90s Marvel books sometimes had. I don't know how you would identify it. I imagine Malibu is pretty close. This isn't, but a lot of the Malibu shite looked like this. I was also thinking it is very, unfortunately, British. The Marvel UK books were heading in this direction before they got canned. It's a look that you usually find in very niche and very bad Marvel comics around 1995. What it makes me think of the most is Doctor Strange, the Faust Love of the Damned era of Doctor Strange. There was also shite like this towards the end of Doom 2019. Maybe I should have looked at one of those issues to put you off the series forever. Every different hue looks both dark and vibrant, which is somehow possible. It all feels very unofficial comic. It all feels very porn comic too. It's very... This is... I mean, the art itself, the pencils and the inks, they are fine. It's the colouring. The colouring looks ugly. It looks trashy. It looks gross. It looks seedy. It's like something you'd have in one of those dodgy comics that you see someone post a scan of online and you think, that's not a real comic, and then you feel depressed that it was actually published by some dirtbag company that you've never heard of. Our main thing takes place at a nightclub. And what this colouring does is it makes any cheesecake feel filthy. I was willing to give this comic an enormous pass if it turned out that this was where the idea from the start of the first movie comes from. But it's not. Just a bunch of Draculas at a nightclub. If this had been the Blood Rave, I would have praised it. The Blood Rave is such a fucking great opener for a movie. Wesley Snipes fights some Draculas at the club. It's not very good. He has an accomplice. I can't tell you anything about him besides he has premonitions, he has visions. And then Big King Dracula reveals himself. What is special here is that I think this is the first meeting between Wesley Snipes and the Dracula since his return. The Dracula was destroyed by Doctor Strange in the 80s. I have his death certificate to prove it. But later, Doctor Strange was involved in resurrecting a bunch of Draculas. And then there was a Tomb of a Dracula miniseries. That maybe is where we saw him return proper. I don't know. Maybe Wesley Snipes is in that, actually. No idea. But this actually improves significantly when we get to this point. The Dracula is written larger than life and evil, and things feel like they actually matter. Most of it is down to pre-existing lore and understanding, but it does feel as if the writer is knowingly using that history rather than looking out in being able to use it. They are just fighting though. There's not much to say. It is a very big improvement over the however many pages that came before, but it's also not enough to make me want to read more of this series. The other thing not making me want to read more is our cliffhanger ending, which is the Dracula has bested Wesley Snipes in the fight. He has won, and now the Dracula is about to suck off Wesley Snipes' neck. And if you have read enough Marvel Comics, you know that the next issue will begin with Wesley Snipes being protected by the chainmail armour on his neck, and this exciting climax is made to feel like a complete piss take. So that is that. Wesley Snipes, the Dracula Hunter versus the Dracula. It's not great. I am developing a new theory. I think maybe every Marvel comic with this style corner box is one to avoid. There's bits in this that aren't smelly piss, but I better conclude it because I did a long list of writers in this video, and whenever I do that, it takes ages to find cutaways for all of the people named. I'll have to give this comic 7 cutaways up.